Welp, here we are once again. Time for my hiatus. My regulars know what this is, but for any casuals or new peeps here, whenever I have my exam coming up for my postgraduate studies, I don't work on anything related to my brand stat. My brand stat is primarily my YouTube channel, but there's most certainly going to be more related to it in the future. The point is, no YouTube videos in the final weeks before an exam. I go full study mode. I go chameleon mode, spending more time as a blue chameleon instead of a red chameleon. I only have 2 exam periods per year. I only have 2 shots at passing a CPA exam per year, so why not maximize those opportunities? I can make as many videos as I want outside of these 2 exam periods per year. If all goes to plan, this is my last hiatus. I've passed 5 CPA exams. I need to pass 6. Once I've passed that, I'm done. I'm a CPA. You also need a recognized degree, which I have, as well as relevant experience. Currently, that hasn't been ticked off, but I think this is as straightforward as getting an already recognized CPA to tick this off. You submit some form and email to your boss/authorized CPA. I'll get my boss to do this later in the year. Now, small tangent, but chances are I'll make a video in the future along the lines of, is university/college even worth it? With the expensive tuition costs, well, some of us who aren't in certain European countries have expensive tuition costs. So with these expensive costs, the time commitment of a few years, and with the availability of information online, why would anyone bother going to uni? Well, some careers require certain formal education processes. You can do baseline accounting work without a degree. In fact, some ambitious students get their first accounting roles whilst still at university. You can do the baseline stuff, but you aren't allowed to do the high-level stuff. There's government regulations behind this, as well as office/corporate politics. If you search the more higher-paying accounting roles, such as finance manager, these will usually require a CPA/CA. CA is Chartered Accountant, which is another professional accounting designation here in Australia/New Zealand/Australia Asia. Now, how do you get your CPA? Can you just enroll in the subjects, pay the enrollment fee and study online? Well, if you could, you can't just pass these 6 exams and become a CPA. Recall the other 2 requirements I mentioned before. You need to have a relevant degree and signed-off experience. If you don't go to uni, how will you get the CPA recognized degree? So, there are some cases where you don't really have a choice but to go to university if you want to work in a certain field. I'm sure there are videos on YouTube on how to perform certain tasks that doctors perform, but I'd still prefer my doctor to have gone to medical school, thank you very much. Alongside this video idea, there's also the argument of, should you work in a career field or just start your own business? I have been against the idea of only doing a business on this channel since the very beginning, but my interpretation was your business was something with low barriers to entry like YouTuber or streamer or dropshipper, the common shit you see when you search top 10 business ideas online. Well, you could have a business that is a spin-off of a standard career, as I mentioned in a recent reaction video. But to do this, you need experience in the field first. If I'm going to call a plumber, I'm going to call someone who's completed an apprenticeship, not someone who's looked at a bunch of YouTube videos on how to fix my piping issues. Something similar applies to accounting here. Most people wouldn't do business with some independent person who doesn't have their CPA. Why would you do that when you could get someone who is a CPA? Okay, well, how do I get this CPA? One of the steps is having experience signed off by an already qualified CPA, and this could only happen if you had worked under one / with a standard job / career first. So there are cases where even if you wanted to self-learn on the internet or just have your own business in a field, you're going to have to go down the traditional route of formal education and working a standard job / career first. But chances are I'll delve deep into these topics in a future video. So that's it. I'm in the home stretch of getting my CPA qualification. The experience sign-off is as simple as emailing something to my boss, I'd do it now, but I'm in the midst of a shake-up at work, which I'll talk about shortly. The hard part is this exam. Study has been going well so far at the time of writing this script, and no doubt it'll continue as this video gets produced. It'll be time to lock in on the exam soon, but I'll share some little life updates before I go. I've done quite a number of these this year, but there has been some big changes this year. In 2021 to 2022, and even 2023, I was still obviously progressing in the game of life, but there were more leaps and bounds made this year in 2024. For example, in 2021 to 2022, I was still going to the gym and following a diet, but there wasn't any real noticeable change in my physique. You scroll forward to 2023 to 2024, the changes in my routine and diet have made some noticeable changes, even as I'm in my late 20s. However, in 2021 to 2022, I passed 2 CPA exams each of those years, but in 2023, I didn't pass any. I failed my 5th CPA exam, financial reporting, twice. I did get better at the study and had a lot of great notes to go over, which is how I passed that earlier this year. The work I put in for my CPA studies in 2023 allowed me to pass in 2024, but as far as the scoreboard was concerned, I didn't make any progress in my CPA studies in 2023. So, see how I progressed in my CPA studies in 2021 and 2022, but not in 2023, but I made progress again in 2024. But in terms of gym, I made basically no progress in 2021 and 2022, but made noticeable progress in 2023 and 2024. In 2021, I started my YouTube channel but had basically no subs. In 2022, my channel finally gained some traction. In 2023, my channel was still growing, but I didn't hit any real milestones. In 2024, I hit 1,000 subs, I hit YouTube Partner, and I hit YouTube ad monetization, all in 2024. So, see how although I was progressing in my brand stat all those other years, the hard milestone goals were showing, and they were hit, in 2024. In 2021, I signed my contract for land. In 2022 and 2023, the land wasn't doing anything. In 2024, I knew it would title, so I went hunting for a home builder, signed a good contract, and managed to secure a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage, 2 lounge, 1 outdoor section home. So although I was progressing in this real estate investor stat part of the game of life, because I secured a lower price and benefited from capital growth in the meantime, a lot of this progress in this section happened in 2024. For my stock trading side of things, yes, I slowly gained knowledge over 2021 to 2023, but in 2024 I started properly charting. This still needs work, a lot of work, especially now since I'm only focused on my exam, because I'm not progressing in this at the moment because I'm focused on my exam. But there was a huge leap made this year for this part of the investor stat. For my career in general, CPA studies aside, I've been handed a lot more company accountant roles this year, specifically in the past few months. So yes, my career was progressing in 2021 to 2023, but larger progress was made in 2024 as I now have more important tasks under my control. But the biggest one is money. 2 financial years ago, I was basically smack bang on $100,000 in total, and that included doing extra night shifts at the wagey job, so that dragged the average up. But it cut into possible gym/study/brand/investment time. Fast forward, there's an extra $26,000 total to my employee package in 2 years. May not sound like much, but I can feel the huge difference. Not only in my ability to borrow money from the bank for my house, but my cash flows, as well as just simply out-earning a good chunk of people in my area. The additional $26,000 boost is huge for this age range and in this region. It's not a competition, obviously. For all I know, the people earning way more are pissing away money on expensive rent they don't need and making frivolous purchases, and I also have other stats in my game of life. I mentioned this idea in another video of how I could be earning like $155,000 right now, but at what cost? But considering I talk a lot about the grind and progressing in the game of life, you'd at least expect me to out-earn many others in my region. If I was working 2 jobs, one of which involving a career, aka formal study/education and experience, and totaling 7 workdays a week, but yet I was still earning below the average in my region, you know something was wrong with my strategy. And I am making the comparison to my region since that's where I work. Obviously, I don't work in New York or Toronto. I work in somewhere in Victoria, Australia. So my salary will be somewhat tethered to the general cost of living in this region. I'm not comparing my income to someone in Sydney, since I don't have a high cost of living area. I mentioned this in my last video, but I could find a job in Melbourne, but it would most likely leave me with the same amount of money in my bank account when you factor in rent payments. I can't buy an apartment in Melbourne since I'm tied up with my current house, and apartments don't have as much capital growth as house on land does. So it's a worse financial move. The growth in my house on land will likely exceed any salary increases from a, quote, better career in Melbourne. And I can't buy a house on land in Melbourne since they're too expensive. And I can't commute up to Melbourne currently, living with my parents in a small country town, since that's literally a 2.5-hour commute each way. 5 hours each way on commute time. Goodbye gym time, goodbye brand time, goodbye mental sanity, let alone the cost of the wear and tear on my car, and additionally, the cost of petrol as well. Look at this Reddit comment on Oz Finance, for example. This person earns $150,000 a year. Pretty darn good, I'd say. But look at these fucking mortgage repayments. $2,247 per fortnight, so $1,123 per week on their mortgage. My mortgage repayment will probably be around $600 a week based on my calculations and chats with my bank. So, my minimum repayment is about half theirs. Now yes, a more expensive house is more equity, which you can use to buy more property elsewhere, but a lot of your mortgage repayments go to interest payments to the bank, especially earlier on in your loan. You don't get a lot of equity until later, unless you pay off your debt faster, which, based on this person's financials, they can't. Example, look at these 2 charts. One shows how your repayments look if you make the minimum repayments per week/month. The other chart shows if you pay down your loan much faster. When you pay down your loan faster, you pay less in interest, but you also start to pay off the principal faster, which is where your equity sits. So, in this case of paying the loan faster, this is my calculation based on what I think could happen with my loan, since my minimum repayments are kind of low for my income. So like this chart is like a sort of semi-practical example of what could happen with me. I didn't just like whip this up for the sake of making a point. Well, like there was a point to showing it, but it's like, it's not unrealistic for me. Like this scenario you're seeing with this chart of paying off my mortgage in like less than 8 years, that's not an unrealistic scenario. But I'll talk about that more another time. And like also with my case, I can rent out rooms, which means I can repay this loan down even faster. So I can have more equity to use sooner for more property. I still need to do more calculations on my income and possible rental income, but I have a rough idea for now. I can talk more on this topic another time for those who don't understand how like equity loan repayments work, but just know for the point of this example, a lot of this guy's mortgage repayments, for now, are just going to paying the bank's interest, and it's unlikely he can pay this off faster and tap into more equity sooner, unlike in my potential scenario. Using a calculation of total income versus minimum repayments, this person earns $150,000 and their mortgage repayments are $2,027 per fortnight. So times 26 fortnights a year, that's $58,422 in minimum repayments. $58,422 divided by $150,000 is roughly 39%. So 39% of their total income is spent on their mortgage, and their repayments are after tax too. I just use a pre-tax income since I want to get this script written ASAP so I can record the voiceover, make the video, and then get on with my study. Unfortunately for me, as per usual, I got carried away, so this script is still kind of pretty long. Pretty standard for my usual videos, but much longer than I wanted. But for my case, $126,000 in income, $600 in weekly repayment times 52 weeks a year equals $31,200 in minimum repayments. $31,200 divided by $126,000 equals roughly 25%. 25% of my total income is spent on mortgage repayments. Recall the figures in both cases use pre-tax income. So these minimum repayments are even worse. They take up more of your post-tax income because the figures I used were for pre-tax salaries. And also keep in mind, my house/land is quite, extravagant, expensive for a first house. Most people have at most a 3-bedroom house as their first place. Usually their first place is a 1 or 2 bedroom unit. I've skipped a step. So if I had a cheaper place, my minimum repayment could easily be in the low 500s per week, possibly even in the 400s per week. I've just found a great strategy to have a more expensive place that I can barely afford, as in I could barely get the loan and the down payment. A lot of things worked out for me. It was a very well-educated bet. And the extra number of bedrooms can literally generate enough rental income to cover my minimum mortgage repayments and utilities. This house can literally pay itself off on its own. I can literally be living in my own home for free, but I'll mention this in a future video. So, this Redditor makes more than me, but is their financial situation better than mine? Who knows? Depends how you dissect this. Also, keep in mind this person has a mortgage, an expensive one at that. I've seen many other examples where people are renting. Nothing wrong with renting. It can be a great way to put yourself ahead. Example, living close to university where you gain education/experience to then enhance your life later on, or living close to a job where you stack resume experience to then move to better jobs in a few years, which then sets you up for a nice life. But in my case, I didn't need to do this. I just have a 1-hour commute each day in my car, since I live in a small country town and I need to drive to a nearby city for work. Point is, I didn't need to rent to get ahead, but in many cases, renting in a specific location can get you way ahead. Those people whose parents live in a major city are at a big advantage that us small town folk don't have. Anyway, long-ass tangent, but my ultimate point was my income/financial position is fantastic for my region, which is all that matters, since I can only operate in my immediate local economy in terms of my employment income. So to summarize all I've said so far, 2024 has been a great year for progress in the game of life. The last part of this video will be me going over some changes/improvements/progress recently in my life. I just made a 2024 half-year update video, but there's already been some changes. For my career, I've moved offices. I now have my own separate office. Pretty sick. I've also got more responsibilities, as I mentioned before, slowly becoming the man in charge, which obviously leads to higher income in the future. I also have more flexible hours, so I can kind of leave whenever I want within reason. So some days I just leave an hour early. It's pretty sick. The extra hour is huge in terms of study time. I was also listening to a CPA in the Black podcast whilst doing my work the other day, and they listed off some sneaky ways to find jobs that aren't advertised, which might come in handy in the future or make for potential overemployment or a contractor type role. That podcast also mentioned different ways of listing achievements on your resume, which I had heard of back in the day, but I never had good examples or put the pieces together until that podcast. So I just learned some extra ways I can spice up my resume. Not that I'd want to use it. I like my current role, but I could use it for either subcontracting my industry accounting skills or potential overemployment. Overemployment is where you work 2 full-time jobs. It used to be common in tech, since you'd work remotely at both jobs. This is obviously impossible to do with 2 places that require you to be in a specific location, such as tradie jobs, emergency services, teaching, nursing, medicine. But it is obviously possible with work-from-home jobs. I was going to list off a few ideas and problems with overemployment, but then this script would be too long and I'm too early in my career to and I'm too early in my career to be seriously considering overemployment, but I like just gathering ideas early, and then if the time comes later and an opportunity presents itself, I'm well armed with information. But I have many other tasks to deal with before I even start to consider the possibility of overemployment. But I could do this via contracting, possibly. It's a half-baked idea, but it's not entirely impossible. I also have a new uniform, which I mentioned in some other video. Pretty snazzy. My new loafers came in the mail the other day too, which is awesome. They're so much more comfortable than the regular dress shoes. For money, nothing notable to report. I didn't receive a second pay raise or anything since my last update, although I do have almost $150,000 in cash on standby for my down payment. My bank only wants me to put down $117,000 for part of my land. $117,000 for my land part of the loan. They're being conservative since I think they have to due to banking regulations, but also because no doubt in the past they've had customers who put down too much of a deposit and now they don't have enough money for another expense that comes up in their life, and now they're in trouble. So after paying down $170,000 for the land, I'll still have more than $30,000 on standby. And this is also at this point in time, roughly when you're seeing this video. This video is probably coming out a couple of weeks after I do it, to be honest. Obviously, I'll still be working after this, so I'll have more of a deposit. I have until around sometime in February 2025 to officially start the building process before I start incurring a higher cost on my contract. So I plan on signing in early December. That gives a couple of weeks before Christmas to finalize the paperwork. Then they can get started sometime in January, which means I avoid any extra costs on my home contract, as well as giving me more time to save for a larger deposit, which means I borrow less from the bank, which is good because it's more equity in the property and lower repayments over the term of the loan. I also got some fees waived and a lower rate. Longish story that's not important, but my initial home loan was supposed to be calculated at 6.14%, and then when we got to the home, the rate as a whole would drop to 5.94%. I was also supposed to have some initial fees, but I was smart and didn't sign the document at first and then got those fees waived later. But enough of that. I'll talk more on this later in the year as things unfold, but for now, I have a huge-ass cash deposit on standby. Don't have this in the stock market. You never know if you might get a downturn, especially since September is historically a very volatile month in the markets. Imagine my $150,000 is invested in the market and it temporarily goes down 5%. I'm down $7,500, but I can't wait for the market to recover since I need to cough up that deposit for the land now or I lose my contract. So that's $7,500 less that I can use as a down payment, which means I have to borrow that money instead from the bank, which means I have to pay interest on that. And it's also not counted in my equity for my land. So don't gamble with real estate, as I've mentioned time and time again. Aesthetics. So I was talking to a gym bro the other day, and he was talking about his cut, and I was talking about my bulk. Well, this one dude in the gym, I swear, is bigger than me, and he's like very aesthetic. He'd literally rival the fitness influencer types. Maybe he's a little smaller than them, but he has a job in the trades. So unlike the online fitness guys, he has an actual job/career. Much harder to stay in shape with one of those. But anyway, I've always considered him the biggest guy in the gym. Like, the biggest guy who isn't fat, that is. My gym isn't a huge one. It's like a local community/town one. So I'm like a big fish in a small pond here. But if he wasn't the biggest/most aesthetic in the gym, then the next in line is probably me. Unless there's some other guy who goes during the day that I don't see. But even then, he'd be featured on the gym's Instagram page. So you kind of know who goes to the gym because they do a lot of meet the members and posting each other on their stories and resharing stories. So point is, I'm either number one or number two in terms of the top dog there, if that makes sense. So anyway, that guy, the number one or number two aesthetic guy, came up in our conversation. We mentioned how you look bigger when you're leaner, which is true, I know that. And this gym bro told me the other day, him and aesthetic guy were like posing next to each other, and gym bro said aesthetic guy was only barely bigger than him. Gym bro is like, he just looks huge because he's so lean. And I said, yeah, I saw aesthetic guy in the gym the other day, and I was trying to size him up. Because aesthetic guy said to me the other month, you're bigger than me. Like he said to me, I am bigger than him. Like, he goes to me, you're bigger than me. And I thought it was just friendly gym bro talk, fucking shredded, brah. Just trying to be like you, brah. Wish I had your pecs, brah. Not as good as your biceps, brah. That type shit. But gym bro said, no, you're bigger than him. Gym bro, a third party, said that I am bigger than aesthetic bro, which is wild, considering, as I said, he rivals online fitness guys. So, how is this progress? Because despite me seeing my growth in pictures, a third party is saying that I'm even bigger than I thought, and I thought I was getting bigger. I suppose body dysmorphia will do that to you. You think you're smaller than you are, but that just means I need to hold this size and cut to like 10% body fat to look insane. I'm currently at like 19% body fat. I either need to do a super slow cut to hold as much size as possible, or I need to bulk a little longer and then do a standard cut, which is probably what I'll choose. And funny thing, at the time of finishing this script tonight, as I sit here, I finished a gym session earlier tonight, and I saw some dude who I used to work with at the wagey job. He doesn't work there anymore, but roughly this time 2 years ago, he started there. And I know that because we worked together at the old store. We moved from the old store in late 2022, and it's currently almost late 2024. So roughly 2 years ago was when I first worked with him. Now, I recall him being actually bigger than me at the time. Well, I saw him at the gym tonight. I literally haven't seen him in the gym in ages. Not sure if we just go at different times, or he went to another gym for a while, or he just straight up stopped going. But I dwarf him now. Like, it's without a doubt that I'm bigger than he is. But rewind the clock back 2 years, I at least thought he was bigger than me, but now there's no way I'd think that now. So once again, another case of my gym progress is starting to show up in other little measures in life. Like, oh, that guy used to be bigger than me, now I'm bigger than him, or oh, this guy literally says that I'm bigger than this other guy who I thought was bigger than me. So it's good to see the gain trains going strong. Now, similar to what I said earlier about money, it's not a competition, it's you against you, or maybe you against your local region, since that's generally a gauge of how you're doing based on others in your same environment. However, in terms of gym, my aim is just to be big and lean enough to be considered universally aesthetic. Me in my uni days, yes, I'm very lean. The Gen Pop most certainly considers this aesthetic. However, I'm a little too small for the aesthetic label in terms of the fitness industry. But if I added a bit more size, then cut, I generally think I'd be close enough to the aesthetic label universally, since that's big enough to have fitness sponsorships, even though fitness sponsorships base you off your audience size, not your physique. But then again, usually your physique dictates your audience size. But alongside being sponsor-worthy, it's also just more aesthetic than most others. I said before, it's not a competition. However, as I also mentioned before, for someone, me, who constantly preaches the grind and leveling up in the game of life or increasing your stats, etc., it would be kinda embarrassing in a way to not be bigger / more aesthetic than most other people. It's like, buddy, is this your goat? The guy who constantly talks about leveling up, meanwhile he's smaller / less aesthetic than the average guy at your gym? So that's a reason to keep pushing. I need to set an example. Otherwise, I would need to shut my mouth if I'm going to keep preaching being great when I can't even do it myself. Once I'm big / lean enough, I can just coast with this physique. Like, look at RFK, pretty ripped for a 69 to 70-year-old, but he's had, 40 plus years of training? Wouldn't he be bigger if you've trained that long? Well, there gets to a point where your physique is plenty good enough. That's my aim. And once it's good enough, you maintain it and work on other parts of your life. Example, David Lade, Joe Delaney, Maxwell Cross, and Jeff Side, all aesthetic. But honestly, these guys haven't really gotten any bigger in the past few years, maybe even past several years. I think Joe and David have gotten smaller, if anything. Why aren't they getting bigger and bigger each year? Well, they're aesthetic enough. They just maintain what they have now, no need to blast gear to get bigger. They're big enough, they're aesthetic enough, and now they can work on their families, as is the case with Joe Delaney, or their Gymshark brand/business/career, as is the case with David Lade, right? In Maxwell Cross's case, bro is travelling heaps at the moment whilst maintaining his physique. Why not lock in and get bigger? Well, he's plenty good enough, and now he can work on other parts of his life. Same with me. My physique has some more work to do, but once that work is done, it's good enough, and now I can slightly back off the gym time and enhance other parts of my life, such as looking at maximizing my career, investments, or brand, and by default, money/wealth. For investments, as I said before, not really checking the charts since I'm focused on study, although I did see NEM looks good for my eyes. Gold seems to be geared up for a nice rally. Purely my opinion, based on what I currently see at the time of writing, this does not constitute financial advice as I don't know your particular financial circumstances. Don't place any trades based on anything mentioned in this video, as this video is just a reflection of my life at a particular point in time. My loan for my land has also been approved, and the loan for my house will come later. I also looked at the possibility of converting my garage into a bedroom. My house will have 4 bedrooms. The second lounge room can become a 5th bedroom, and the garage could potentially become a 6th. Your garage needs to be above 2.1 meters to be converted into a bedroom, which mine is. There's a few other stipulations, but at least there's a few other stipulations required, but at least my garage meets that criteria. There's obviously issues with finding people who'd want to live with 5 others, and this 6-bedroom house thing is a very half-baked idea, but at least I have the option. It's not like I'm pondering what color I want my Lamborghini to be. I'm not even close to that, nor do I want one in all honesty. Too much maintenance, you have to find a specialized mechanic, import specialized parts and wait for them to arrive, etc. But with my house, I have that option/possibility of 5 bedrooms for rent. It's not like I'm trying to fit 5 bedrooms of rent in my 2-bedroom apartment. I also attended some business events in my nearby city the other week, and I learned about using self-managed super funds for real estate investing. I'll briefly summarize. Self-managed super fund is basically managing your retirement funds instead of some other institution doing it. Here in Australia, you can't touch your retirement money until retirement age, and these retirement funds can't invest in physical real estate, like an actual house. But self-managed super funds can. So in a few years, I'll look at that. Instead of my money being parked in the stock market, I'd prefer if it was parked with Aussie real estate. That provides greater returns, tax deductions, etc. So that's a juicy tidbit for the investor stack going forward. There's also an element of asset protection with that too. Quite a number of benefits. For my brand/YouTube channel, we hit 1,600 subs recently. Pretty crazy. It was only earlier this year we hit 1,000. We'll keep progressing and moving on up. Thanks for following me along with my journey in the game of life. And whilst all of this is going on, I've been sussing a lot of election stuff. This is my first election where I'm actually really following what's going on. I've never put this much effort into learning about the Aussie elections, so that's an extra added spice to the game of life. By the time my exam is over, there'll only be a month until the US election. So alongside all my usual game of life progress, we've got the AFL finals here in Australia coming up soon. I don't normally follow the AFL, but I like being a part of the Aussie culture. So the finals will be played in September. We get the grand final eve off here in Victoria as an added public holiday. Lol, how's that? We get a public holiday off before a major sporting event. It's funny because the Saturday morning is when it's the busiest. I worked every grand final day at my wagey job since I started. The mornings are way busier than the Friday before, since most people pick fresher food for the day. So, for those who don't know, the AFL is Australia's version of football. We also have a rugby union, but that's more popular in other states. AFL, or Aussie Rules Football, or footy, as we call it here, used to be a Victorian-specific thing, just in the state I live in, but it expanded to all of Australia. It's most certainly the biggest sport in my state. Apparently rugby is more popular in New South Wales and Queensland. I don't know and I don't care. The point is, footy is our big sporting thing. And the AFL Grand Final is a huge-ass event. It's like the Super Bowl in the States. Not as big, of course, but it's got the same sort of vibe. So the AFL Grand Final is always a Saturday. Super Bowl is always a Sunday. For my American friends, it'd be like if the Super Bowl was on a Saturday and you had the Friday off work as a public holiday before the Super Bowl. That's what we have here in Victoria, Australia. My Friday off work will be spent studying, unfortunately, rather than watching all the hype. But still, a paid day off is pretty good. I'll work at my wagey job that Saturday. I'll be frantically rushing in the morning, but for the last part of my shift, I'll legit be watching the game / listening to it whilst doing my work. Will work care? I don't know, but I know I'll get away with it since I've done it before. Getting paid to watch the game whilst doing some easy wagey job stuff? Yes, sir. A few weeks after the grand final will be my exam, and a few weeks after my exam will be the US election. A few weeks after that, I'll be looking at finalising my contract with my home builder and organising the loan for that. A few weeks after that, it's Christmas. Wow, the end of the year is only a handful of major events away. A sporting grand final, a potentially final exam to totally finish off my formal studies, potentially the most important election in US history, then potentially the most important loan I ever make in my whole life, and then Christmas. Time flies. So that'll do it. It's time to lock in for me. I'll see you on the other side, hopefully as a champion. Hopefully my CPA studies will be done and dusted next time you hear from me. Thanks for watching. Best wishes. I'll see you in a bit over a month.